Welcome to episode 7 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. I am your host, Clayton Tyner. I really appreciate everyone who jumps on. This is a podcast where we explore what matters, and that means we cover a lot of topics. I'm starting with the assumption that your life really does matter. Like you have incredible potential, that you are put on earth to have an impact. And so, because your life matters, we should explore topics, ideas, and truths that matter. I started in episode 1 of the podcast. We called it Ready, Set, Start. Today, we're kind of changing pace, it would seem. Today is called Time to Quit. So, in 7 episodes, we went from Ready, Set, Start all the way to Time to Quit. And so, this is not me quitting the podcast. This was not my clever way of letting you know that we're not putting out any more shows. In fact, it's far from that. I do want to talk about the topic of quitting. And I actually think not only is this not in opposition to episode 1, but that the two actually require each other to have a full level of success. In episode 1, we were talking about getting beyond the comfort and the safety of the walled fortresses that we put around ourselves, going on the adventure of a lifetime and facing our dragons. If you can go back, if you want to, you can go back and listen to episode 1. We talked about how the dragon is like this amalgamation of all of the fears you have about starting or doing something new. Today, I want to talk about quitting. And this is a topic that a lot of people have a real struggle with. Chances are that there are many of you listening to this who, if you could do exactly what you wanted to in work right now, you would quit. Like if there was a safety net where you were guaranteed that the world would catch you as you fall, you would quit. You're unhappy with your supervisor, you're unhappy with leadership, you feel like you have stagnated, you've been passed up for promotions, you don't like the people that you work with as peers, maybe you're a manager, you've been given lots of responsibility but almost no authority, which, by the way, if you're wanting to set someone up for failure, give them lots of responsibility that way outpaces the authority that you give them. And so then they're responsible for things that they don't have the authority to actually manage correctly. It's kind of a side note, but maybe you found yourself in that position. Maybe you have employees under you and they just drive you crazy. And it feels like the harder that you work to fix it, the worse things get. Studies come out from time to time about how people feel in the workplace. And every time these studies come out, it is like high numbers, 3/4, 4/5 of people who say they are miserable at work. And if you're miserable at work, you probably want to quit. And our lives are a lot more than just our careers. There are a lot of people in dating relationships and they want out, but they just can't figure out how to get out. You really want to quit that relationship. There are all kinds of areas where we find ourselves in situations where we're no longer happy, we're no longer satisfied. But quitting is a very difficult thing. And we have, first of all, this idea of sunk costs. This is a fallacy I talk a lot about because I think that it affects people at such a high level. People won't break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend because they feel like they've spent too much time in the relationship. It's like, well, I already know like what they like to eat, and we kind of already have our rhythms settled, and like a lot of my stuff is at their house, and these are all sunk costs. It's like I've already dated them for 2 years, right? So now I'm like 2 years older, and I would have wasted all that time if I get out of it. And think about that statement. We've been dating for 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years. We've been dating for 2 years, and so I won't get all that time back. What you're saying is, I'm going to stay with this person another 2 years, another 5 years, marry them another 50 years. And so you're going to waste all of your life moving forward. You're going to waste 50 years because you're worried that you might have wasted 2. That's the sunk cost fallacy. It's like investors who, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the investment is going south and they continue to pour money into it, because to quit pouring money into it is to acknowledge that they wasted all of the money that they put in at the front. And so quitting is very difficult. And many people spend their entire lives in jobs that they hate. It's not fulfilling. It's not meeting their purpose, just because they don't want to walk through the inconvenience of quitting. It's scary. It is venturing once again into the unknown. Then the other side of quitting is many people quit things that they shouldn't have quit. They find themselves in a difficult season with an uphill battle, something that requires an incredible amount of grit. They find themselves in a job that is right for them, but surrounded by people who make that job difficult, or maybe assigned to tasks that are somewhat outside of their skill set or their passion. And people make momentary decisions to quit, giving up a long-term benefit to them. And so there's a lot around this. And if we could get a framework for how to quit the wrong things and how to stick in there with the right things, then there's a much higher chance that you can live a level of success that everyone desires to live. Today, we're talking about when it's time to quit. Here's some bad advice. I think this is Vince Lombardi. I'm not sure. He gave a lot of good advice, but this quote is attributed to him. Quitters never win, and winners never quit. Sounds right, like that's a good saying to put on the side of your locker room right before you go out for the big game. It's like, yo, quitters never win and winners never quit. And you can't quit on your team, and you can't quit at practice, and you can't quit on that drill. And when you're doing up downs and you're doing down and backs and you're running those miles and you're in the weight room, quitters never win and winners never quit. I'm not saying there's no value to this. I'm just saying that it can't be pushed to its logical conclusion and be right. There are appropriate things to quit all of the time. I wet the bed growing up. I'm pretty pumped that I quit wetting the bed. That was the right thing to quit. You might be in a relationship that is not going well. And if you were to take an honest assessment of it, the majority of it is your problem. And it's you because it's the same problems all of your relationships have had. And the one common denominator in all the relationships that you have had is you. And so maybe there are some habits that you really need to consider quitting, or maybe there is a worldview that informs how you're supposed to manage relationships or deal with the opposite sex. And that's a worldview you need to quit. And so success requires that we quit the wrong things and that we persevere through the right things. Success requires quitting the wrong things and persevering through the right things. And so often in life, we end up getting this backwards. So often we are unwilling or unable to quit the wrong things. And so often we are so quick to quit when we're in the middle of the difficulty of pursuing the right things. And I'm going to be suggesting a book to you guys today. And as y'all know, I always try to make a pitch for reading. And reading is going to be one of the big correlations between the people who are successful and the people who are not. It is a big factor. And when you look, like, even if you, of course, you have to read to do this, but if you read the biographies of the great men and women who have changed history, all of them in the modern world were avid readers. I'm sure there's some exceptions to that rule, but not very many. Today, I'm going to be recommending another Seth Godin book. This book is called The Dip. I've got a link to it in today's description. And when you buy through that link, it helps out the podcast. But regardless, if you want to go there on your own, buy this book. This book is a total of, it's not many pages. Oh, it doesn't help when you have it upside down. This book is 75 pages. That's it. You can literally read this book in an hour. It even has lots of pictures in it. It's a small book. And sometimes we think that the powerful books are the ones that are, a minimum of 600 pages or whatever. Those are the ones that the real ballers read. It takes a lot of power to write a 75-page book. And this is one of the books that had the most immediate and long-lasting impact on my life. This book is called The Dip. I want to talk about this model, and Seth Godin got it from a book that he read back, I think he said in the 70s or 80s. But the dip is the idea that in life, there is a season when we begin to put effort towards almost anything, whether you're getting in the gym and you're starting to really lift hard, whether you are starting a business and you just jump out of the gate, whether you are in research and development on a product, right? So we put in effort, and because it's new and we have synergy and we're passionate about it because we're starting it, there is this immediate climb towards results. You start seeing success quickly. We see this in relationships as well. It's like if you get in a relationship with someone, you go on the first date and decide, let's really give this thing a shot. there's almost immediate results, and everyone's on their best behavior and everybody's getting along with everyone. However, after that first initial rise in results and success, that is where the dip comes in. And everything significant has a dip. And so you have a small rise in results. You continue to put in effort. And instead of seeing increased results, you actually see a loss of traction. The dip is where life gets very difficult. The dip is the part in the dating relationship where you first start allowing the other person to see the parts of you that are not the best parts. It's your first big arguments. In the weight room, the dip is after this initial boost of muscle gain and weight loss. It's a long plateau where you're working just as hard, if not harder, but you're not seeing any results. We have dips in our careers and we jump into a new work environment. And because we're new to the environment, we get to immediately feel the impact of who we are and what we bring to the table, our unique skills. And so we see results quickly. But then there's always a dip. There's always a time where the organization catches up to who you are. You're no longer, the special guy or girl who came with all of your own special qualities. You're now one of the coworkers, and maybe you get that promotion and you think the promotion is going to make life so much easier, but it actually creates a sense of competition among you and the people who used to be your peers. And maybe you were co-workers with someone and now you're managing them, and that can be incredibly difficult. And everyone thinks they want to be a leader, but the higher up you go in leadership, the more you are consistently dealing with the hardest things that the organization has to offer. We're in the process of fundraising at MetaChurch. And so it's like we kicked off and we had a huge surge right away. And now, baby, we are in the dip. Like we are deep in the dip. We are fundraising in and now hopefully towards the tail end of a global pandemic, And so what do you do in the dip? And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see, and if you're watching or listening rather on audio, after the dip comes exponential growth. It's on the other side of the dip that you find your potential. It's on the other side of the dip that you find people who are world class. It's on the other side of the dip that you find organizations who actually change and impact the world. It's on the other side of the dip that you find the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. And there is a massive, massive difference between the ultra successful in life, the people who are world class, who have success and significance, and everyone else who is floundering, hoping for some sense of fulfillment. And the difference is those who can navigate the dip. And so it's very difficult. And you think about all of the people who set out to change the world and the very, very few people who actually do it. The people who don't make it to that status, the people who live with the regret of what if I would have stuck in there? What if I would have done things differently? Those are people who get stuck in the dip. The dip is where you want to quit. Things are not going your way. You get moved to a new supervisor and y'all just do not get along. You just butt heads constantly. And you think this isn't worth my time anymore. The dip is where drama becomes overwhelming. The dip is where you love this person that you are dating, but you're not sure if you can get over some of their idiosyncrasies. We all go through the dip, and most people don't survive it. When you're truly in the dip, success requires persevering through the right things. However, there are times where we think we're in the dip and really we're at a dead end. And so the difficult part is knowing accurately where you're at in your life, where you're at in your relationships, where you're at in your career. If you think you're on a dip, which means that you just have to have a little more perseverance to get towards your potential, but you're actually at a dead end where no matter what you do, how hard you work, how patient you are, there is no payoff. Those are two massively, massively different situations. Life requires a direction. To properly orient our life, to properly map who we are and where we're going, we have to understand where we currently are, and we have to have a direction. We have to be aiming our lives at something. And we can stop right there because it it seems like there is a high percentage of people who don't have their life intentionally aimed at much of anything. They want a job because they want some money, because they want to buy some things. That's a statement that has no direction. There's all kinds of jobs. There's all kinds of things. There's all levels of money. What are your actual goals? If you don't have something that you are aimed at, then instead of intentionally attacking life, life will navigate you, and more than likely, it will navigate you directly towards dead ends. It's just how life works. Success rarely comes out of nowhere. And you can be really successful and really, really unfulfilled. You can be really, really wealthy and really, really depressed. And the point of this podcast is never for someone to find success and wealth at the expense of fulfillment, what? Of being fulfilled and of having a sense of purpose in their life. And so the first question to ask is, how do I determine a direction? This is mapping your life. Like, where are you right now? That's a really good question. You should actually seek to answer that question. Where are you in life right now? Are you in a job? Are you on a career path that actually has the possibility of leading you towards your purpose, your passions, and your potential? Or do you have a job to make some money, to buy some things? You need to get more specific. What is your purpose? What is your passion? And what is your potential? Where should you be pursuing a career? What path should you be on? Are you an entrepreneur who is just dying 1,000 deaths working as a cog at a big company every day? It's time to consider what it is you need to do with your life, not some job for some money for some things. What level of money do you need to not just have success, but significance? What do you need? And what exactly are you wanting to do with that money? Are you wanting to buy a house and have equity for yourself? Are you wanting to start a family and you need room and a yard for the kids? Are you wanting to live in the urban core of a city, and your dream is to be in a loft? And how much does that loft cost? Which informs question 2, which is actually how much money do you need to be making, which also informs question 1, which is what is it that you should be doing? How do I determine a direction? Because here's the deal. Whatever direction you pick, if it is significant, it will have a dip. Doing something significant in life always requires pain. It always requires pain. There is no easy path to the top. There is no shortcut. And maybe you immediately think of like the trust fund babies who everything is just handed to them. And I want to remind you, you can be very successful and you can be very wealthy and you can be very unfulfilled and very depressed. And so there's no shortcut. There is no shortcut. It takes work. It takes navigating the dip. And the successful and significant in life make it through the dip. And the people who spend their life wondering what if quit too soon or stick with the wrong paths. And so how do I determine direction? A good question to ask is there purpose to my path? It's hard, we go to college and we're 18 years old and they tell us you need to determine what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I was so frustrated when Lane, our oldest, was coming out of middle school and starting high school. They actually had them come in and decide their career track in 8th grade. It's like, I was a complete idiot in 8th grade. I didn't know anything about the world. I didn't know anything about who I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. How can you possibly make that decision that early? At 18, most people aren't equipped to really make that decision, to really know exactly what direction they want to point their life in. And it's so hard because college has such high sunk costs. And so, you pick a medical degree, you want to be a doctor, and you go into med school. And by the time you're in year one, you're like $150,000 in student debt. And then you realize your purpose is not on the other side of that dip. That is not what is going to fulfill you. Now you're 21 years old, and you know a little bit more about life, and maybe you've met someone you want to spend the rest of your life with, and maybe you've had some significant experiences now that you finally have the freedom of being out from under your parents' house, and you realize there isn't purpose, passion, and potential on the other side of a massive dip. And medical school is a massive dip. Or maybe you're just your second year into business school, and you always drew and you always painted, and it's like, man, I should have gotten an art degree. I would be happier, more successful, and more significant just being an art teacher at an elementary, middle, or high school than I would making $1 million as a businessman. That's a tough moment, and you're halfway through your degree, and what are you going to do? Because very few people quit the wrong things. And so they stay in the wrong things, in the wrong business, in the wrong relationships, living in the wrong cities, in the wrong houses, with the wrong mortgage payment, driving the wrong cars. They stay in there forever and get to the end of their life and think, what if? On the other side, we have this problem where we get into the dip and our potential passion and purpose is on the other side, but things get so hard that we quit the right things. We quit the things that we should persevere through. And so you have to start with this question: is there purpose to my path? And potential is hard to gauge, and chances are none of us really know what our potential is. And the only way that we can even get an estimation of it is if we start being super intentional about how we are managing our life and mapping out our future. And passion is difficult as well, because passions, they wane and they wax. Passions change. We're going to talk about that in just a little while. But purpose is the strongest pull towards where you should be going. You can be making a fraction of the money that you would get on the wrong path. But if you're doing something that fulfills your purpose, then, man, life is good. Do something that is actually your purpose in life, and you'll make an impact on the world. You'll leave behind a lot more than the life you lived. You'll leave behind a legacy. When you are really pursuing purpose, it becomes easier and easier to keep your head down and persevere through the dips in life. Is there purpose to my path? On the other side of whatever struggles you're going through, is there going to actually be a payoff? Another way to ask this is the dip worth the destination? If you're miserable at work, is it worth going through that dip for what it is going to get you? Are you going to go through all of this pain and all of this consternation, and on the other side of it, all that is left is more misery? Are you going to go through all of this frustration and all of this drama, all of this annoyance, just to get to the other side where you're nowhere closer to your purpose? How do you determine a direction? You find a path that points you towards your purpose. If you're not familiar with what your purpose is, that's a little bit outside the scope of today's podcast, but that is step one. If you don't have a purpose in life, then you're always just going to have some job to make some money, to buy some things. And I'm not saying that that is like the worst suffering that you can endure in life. I am saying there is a far more significant way to live your life, to navigate this world, to map your future. Your purpose is a collection of who you are, where you came from, your personality, your skills, your talents, your gifts. I believe that your purpose comes out of your story, like directly out of your story, and not just the positive parts of your story. often our purpose is actually rooted in the deepest pains that we have endured in life. And our pain is what causes us to build skill sets. And we need skill sets to navigate a world that we know causes pain. And so you'll either use your skill sets as coping mechanisms to stay in a cycle of the mundane, or you will turn those skill sets towards a purpose that actually makes an impact in the world. And I believe through a Christian ethic that the greatest purposes that you can have, whether it is in business or commerce or sales or the medical field, whatever it is and whatever you're doing, your greatest purpose will be something that helps others. At some level, your greatest purpose is something that helps others. And if you're headed towards that kind of purpose, if you can discover that purpose, and it's not just some job for some money to buy some things, it is a specific path for a specific amount of resources to live a specific kind of life. Who do you want to be? How do you want your life to operate? How do you want your marriage to operate? How do you want your family to function? What do you guys value together? If you don't have clarity on those things, then you don't know what dips are worth it. You don't know what destination you are heading towards, and your life matters too much to not know the answer to some of these questions. You have to pick a path that actually matches your purpose. And if you have found yourself, or you find yourself in the future on a path that is not leading you towards your purpose, that is the moment where you have to begin to truly consider whether this is the right kind of thing to quit. And man, it is hard to quit. I get it. It's like, wow, I have to put on my resume, and, you know, I already know all my coworkers, and I've really gotten used to this commute. It's like, well, man, what if my commute ends up different? Or what if I take a job in a different city? And then what if I have to move? I mean, nobody wants to move. You got to put everything in boxes. Let me tell you, there will always be a rationalization for why to stay exactly where you are, stuck at a dead end that will leave you towards the end of your life wondering, what if? And so how much is your life worth? Is it worth navigating yourself to a path of purpose? And it's not an easy path. You must go through the dip. Everyone who has done anything significant has made it to the other side of the dip. That's where your potential, your passion, and most importantly, your purpose is found. And so you have to assess your level of risk, and you have to assess your level of responsibility. If you have a wife at home, a husband at home, a spouse and kids at home, you have to think about that. And there's a potential that you have to work your way to quitting. You have to put a plan together. You got to start getting resumes out. You may not have the resources, you may not have the money in the bank to just drop a 2 weeks notice with no plan. This isn't a call to foolishness, but it is a call to getting specific about the life that you want to live, to quit anything that is significantly in the way of that life, and to persevere through difficult things that are a part of the destination. And so a good question to consider is, why do I want to quit? Because sometimes quitting is the answer to the life you want to live. And sometimes quitting is the greatest way to sabotage a path that you are on to great potential. And here is where I've seen people make the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake is trading long-term potential, long-term purpose, because you are experiencing short-term pain. The question to ask is, am I trading long-term potential and purpose because right now I'm enduring short-term pain? I'll give you a couple of examples. In the Jewish scriptures, there are brothers that are born. They're twins. They're named Jacob and Esau. And Esau is born first. Now, at this point in this time, thousands of years ago in the Jewish culture, it was a big deal to be the firstborn son. And everyone got an inheritance. And Jacob and Esau were born to Isaac. And Isaac was like a very wealthy dude. And so the firstborn always got a double portion of the inheritance. And so you literally get twice as much when your father dies as all of your other siblings. And their birth was so close that the Bible says, that Jacob came out, grasped on to Esau's heel. It's a very close race, right to the proverbial finish line. And don't think about that too much because it'll get gross quickly. But Esau is first, and Jacob just has to deal with it. And there's nothing he can do about it. But Jacob is a deceiver. He's a really crafty guy. And he's a mama's boy, and he kind of stays at home and he stays out of the sun, and Esau is a hunter gatherer. He's a manly man. He's this like redheaded Hulk, he's like Thor. He's out there doing the hard work, and Esau is really loved by his father. And one day Esau comes in from hunting and he is starving. Apparently the hunt did not go too well. He hasn't eaten anything in days. And he is like, you know, that moment where you say you're starving and what you really mean is I am really, really hungry. Like I'm not actually about to die, but I'm starving in quotes. Esau is starving. And I don't know, I don't know how starving. I assume he's really hungry. And Jacob has made a bowl of beans. And Esau wants it. Like he'll do anything for it. And so Jacob sees his end. He sees his moment to make his move. And he says, I'll give you this bowl of beans if you will give me your birthright. Esau is in short-term pain. His father is like the wealthiest guy in the world. He can get to some food. He can get to some crackers. There are some Cheez-Its in the cupboard. He just has to walk home. He is in short-term pain, and he trades his long-term purpose. He trades his destiny for a bowl of beans. I'll give you another example. Katie and I have been watching Survivor, and right now on Netflix, the only season that's up is season 28. And it's common in Survivor for them to have a rewards challenge where they do a raffle. And so they give all the contestants like $500. And then, he like the host like puts different things on the table and then they can bid for it. And here's the deal. Everyone knows that at the end of this raffle, there's going to be a significant I don't even know what you would call it, but it's an advantage really to whatever the next challenges are, a significant advantage in the game. And if you've been living under a rock forever, Survivor is a game where they put a bunch of people in the wilderness and they have to stay out there for like a month or so. And then at the end of it, the last person left wins $1 million. And so there's $1 million on the line, and they start this raffle, and the host, Jeff Probst, he keeps putting on like steaks. He'll set a steak up there, or a rack of ribs, or, a hamburger and beer, or quesadillas and a margarita, And so it's like these people are starving. They've been eating white rice and drinking well water for a month at this point. And so people give in and they say, I'll give $40, $60, $80. And they start bidding on this food. And they all know that at the end of this challenge, there will be an advantage, significant advantage that they can bet on. This is an advantage that is pushing them closer to $1 million prize. With $1 million, you can go back home after this show and buy all the freaking ribs that you want. And they know this, and they start bidding. And there are 3 players in this season who just sit there, and they are watching everyone else eat. They haven't eaten anything like this in a month, and they're watching these people just take down ribs, And then the advantage comes out, and they have all of their money to bid with. Are we trading long-term potential for short-term pain? If you're actually in the dip, that is a good place to be. That is the struggle that comes before the significance. And sometimes the dip is like a 6-month season. More often, it's like a gradual process over many, many years. I mean, it takes work to be world class. It takes work to meet your potential. And so how do you get there? And in the dip, there's always a lot of short-term pain. There's always drama. There's always infighting. There's always difference of opinion. There are crappy peers, crappy employees, crappy bosses. We've all experienced this before. And so if you're actually on your path to purpose and you're just enduring short-term suffering, you can't quit and give up your long-term significance. You can't give up your purpose for this pain. And so you have to get a wider view. And this is why you have to know where you're at in life. And this is why you have to start being intentional about mapping out your future. If you can begin with the end in mind, if you can see your future, if you know what purpose is on the other side of this pain, then you can endure it. But if you can't see except right in front of you, if all you can see is the short term, then the pain will overwhelm you. And instead of persevering towards your purpose, you will quit. And just like when we don't quit the wrong things, when we do quit the right things, at the end of it, we're left with the same. And the same is, what if I would have stayed? And divorce is so easy now, And even the Bible gives some areas where divorce is allowed. Like if someone is unrepentantly in an affair, it's just like, just deal with it. I'm going to be cheating on you. Or if they're abusive, or if they abandon you. The problem is that affairs have become so commonplace and they've become so simple. And I know they're not actually simple. Like emotionally, they're not simple. Legally, they're very simple. In the United States, it's actually fairly recent that you were able to have a no cause divorce. You used to have to prove cause to dissolve a marital union. And now it's just irreconcilable differences. Every marriage goes through the dip. And not just one. You're going to go through many dips in your relationships. And this is why if you're single or you're dating, um, you have to get past just like how they look the day that you meet them. You have to get past like how many followers they have on Instagram. You have to pick someone who you can live out your purpose with. It's not going to matter what y'all look like in 40 years. It's not going to matter what social status they have amongst friends that you're not going to still have in 20 years. What matters is that you pick someone where you're both headed towards your purpose. Because if you have purpose out in front of you, you can handle pain and you will go through the dip. And the dip is where people quit, and they quit the things that they should persevere in. And your marriage is something that you should persevere in. And there is potential on the other side of it. But you have to be able to see beyond it. If you can't see beyond it, it will overwhelm you. Why do you want to quit? Maybe you are at work or you're in college. Maybe you've started a career or even started your own business, and you're at a place where your passions have just changed. And so that's a good question. Why do you want to quit? Ask yourself, have my passions changed? And this happens to us. A lot of times we're very passionate about the idea of something. And then when we actually put it into application in our lives, we find out we don't actually love that thing. There are people who want to be doctors, and the first time they see blood, it's like, yep, this is not for me. There are people who want to be vets because in their fantasies, it's like all of the animals are just kind and they're cute, and you get to pet dogs, and you get to like hang out with horses and stuff. And then you like go to college and you do your first internship at a veterinary clinic, and it's like, oh, my whole job is just picking up animal poop. It's like, maybe I don't want to be a vet. This happens all of the time. There are people who even have skill sets to achieve some level of success in a given area, but over time we change. We do change as people. And so oftentimes our passions will change. Now, our purposes are normally a lot steadier, and purposes are somewhat malleable. And so the way that you effectuate your purpose may look different at different seasons of your life. But oftentimes your passions that lead to your purpose, they can really change, and maybe they have. And so you have to be honest with yourself about that, because you might be 5 years into sinking a lot of time and a lot of costs into this passion. Are you okay with going the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, following that same path when your passions are no longer there? This is one reason that we have to prioritize purpose over passions, because our passions and our purpose are trying to lead us to our potential, and passions are far more fickle. This is one reason that we have to have more than passion in a relationship to go beyond dating and to actually consider marriage. Passions wax and they wane. It happens. And the things that you are passionate about today, there is no guarantee you'll be passionate about tomorrow or 5 years from now or 25 years from now. And we marry for life. That is what we say. We get up in front of people and we say, till death do us part. And so what's beautiful is if you're in a relationship that is based on a mutual purpose that you can pursue together, then your individual passions can shift, change, and morph. And that might even cause a dip as you seek to understand how each other are changing over time. But you can persevere through the dip, get to the other side, and actually have more passion together and more passion for each other than you did originally. And so maybe your passions have changed and that's why you want to quit. So the question is, if your passions change, is that a good enough reason to quit? And the answer goes back to our answer all along. Are you on a path that leads to your purpose? If you are involved in something that you're passionate about, but it's a temporary passion and isn't leading you towards your purpose, then it might be time to quit. At the same time, if your passions have changed, but you still are headed towards your purpose, it might be time to persevere. Why do you want to quit? An important question is this a strategic stop or a questionable quit? And this is just encompassing all of the things that we've already talked about. Is this a strategic stop? Strategic quitting separates those who are average and those who wildly succeed. The ability to pinpoint the things, processes, relationships that they need to put an end to and follow through with it. The things that are taking up their time, that are distracting them from their destiny, that are not building their unique contribution to the world. Those things must be quit. And sometimes those are jobs, and sometimes those are just roles in your jobs, and sometimes those are even just habits in your own personal life that are distracting you from your roles in your job. Quit strategically. If not, you're going to be always making questionable quits. And it's just 50-50. It's like sometimes you're going to quit the wrong things, sometimes you're going to quit the right things. Map your life, aim your life at something. Have a direction that has intention behind it. Don't settle for some random job for some amount of money so you can buy some things. Know who you want to be. Put a plan in place to get there. Is it time to quit? I think this really comes down to the question of who do I want to become? And I ask that intentionally. It's not who am I or who do I want to be, because both of those seem to lock you into the present tense. We're talking about mapping your future. And so a better question is, who is it that I want to become? James Clear in his book Atomic Habits says, every action you take is a vote for the person you are becoming. So if you are clear on the person that you want to become, then you'll become clear on the purpose that your life holds. And if you're clear on the purpose that your life holds, then you're going to start seeing the actual avenues that are realistic paths that could lead you towards that purpose. And if anything isn't lining you up to those paths and to your purpose, those are the things that you have to have the courage to put on the chopping block. Never rationalize your reality. This is so hard, man. We are masters of rationalization. We can rationalize anything. It's why people stay in toxic dating relationships. It's why people stay in fruitless careers. It's why people invest in stocks that are never going anywhere. We can rationalize it away. We can tell ourselves that we have sunk too much cost into it. We can deny our own ability to make something of our life. There are a million ways that we can turn our reality into the sum total of the excuses that we're making for not taking the appropriate action. And so just get real with yourself. Are you staying stuck because you have rationalized your position? Are you unwilling to quit because you've talked yourself out of it, even though you know it's the right answer? On the other side of it, are you quitting something that you should stick with because you've given yourself the rationale for leaving? I mean, if the company really wanted me here, then, they would do something about this supervisor who is so unfair. You know, we can rationalize our way into leaving the opportunity of a lifetime that if we would just stick through the dip, we would meet a potential that we can't even imagine. Never rationalize your reality. Call yourself on it, man. If we're not calling ourselves on our own BS, like who's going to? Only you know the depth of rationalization that you're going to keep yourself where you are in life. Become a master of everything you need for your end goal and nothing else. And okay, that is a statement that is way too extreme. It is hyperbolic and it's a definitive. And we all learned in Star Wars that only Siths deal in absolutes. So I don't actually mean nothing else. I don't mean don't have hobbies, because you should. Hobbies are actually, I believe, a super healthy part of an engaged and meaningful life. But there's a huge conversation around specialization and diversification of talent. So should you highly, highly specialize in one thing, that you're only good at that one thing, and that's the thing that's going to make you world class? Or should you diversify your skill sets across a range of things and become a jack of all trades, right? And so what do they say? They say a jack of all trades and a master of none. I think the answer, like most things in life, is somewhere in between there. If you hyper specialize, you run some very real risks. The world is changing all of the time. There are people who look at the data of the job creation in our marketplace who believe that the majority of jobs our school-age children will go into have not yet been created. You can put all of your eggs in one basket, and if that basket disappears, you are in serious trouble. At the same time, you don't want to be a jack of all of the trades and a master of none. You don't want to spread your skills out so thin that you have nothing intentional to aim at for your future. I think you should become a master of all of the things you need for your end goal. And so maybe you are in a position, I'm a preacher, and so I'm a public speaker. I'm a communicator. And so a goal would be to become a master communicator. And I'm far from that, but that is a goal of mine. However, if I only become a communicator and nothing else, then I take away my ability to lead the organization. I quit building the business skills that I need to help keep our movement organized and our staff heading in the appropriate direction. At the same time, if I only become a great manager, a world-class manager, and part of my position is public speaking, then I'm going to be trading one for the other. And so in my mind, the realistic way of approaching what to quit and what to keep is to be precise about all of the skills that you need to make your greatest unique contribution to the world. Become a master at all of those things. And the things that you like and the things that you love, but that aren't leading to that end goal, quit. I read this book years ago. And again, I'll remind you that that is The Dip by Seth Godin. Incredible, powerful book. Link in the description below. At the time, I was a worship leader for a large church in San Antonio, and I love music. I always have. I really do, and I was hired to do that. But my first purpose was never music. My first purpose has always been communicating truth. Because of that, I had a sneaking suspicion that toward my ultimate unique contribution would be preaching. And I would get myself in trouble because I was there to play the songs and sing the music, but I would do these long extended speaking moments as well because that's where my purpose was. And music was a vehicle to get me into the position I needed to be able to try and communicate truths to the people who would come to our services. And I loved music. I loved all aspects of it. I was never particularly talented at it though. I knew that music was a short-term passion, that it was going to get me in the position I needed to be in, and it might even lead me into the dip, but it wasn't something that could get me out of the dip and towards my ultimate potential. And so I was trying to stay with what was working and what was leading me towards my potential, but also not be so engrossed in it that I forfeited building the skill sets and mastery that I needed in order to take my next steps out of the dip. And so when I was reading, when I read this book for the first time, I got to the very last page and I'll read it to you. This is how it ends. All our successes are the same. All our failures, too. We succeed when we do something remarkable. We fail when we give up too soon. We succeed when we are the best in the world at what we do. And we fail when we get distracted by tasks we don't have the guts to quit. I'll be honest, I don't fully agree with Seth Godin's definitions of success and failure in this passage. But the last line of the entire book is we fail when we get distracted by the tasks we don't have the guts to quit. I loved playing electric guitar, and it wasn't because I was good at the electric guitar. As a matter of fact, you might even say I was not good at the electric guitar, but I loved it. And for those of you who don't know, there's a lot that goes into an electric guitar setup. There is what kind of amp, or in my case, multiple amps that you play through. And then there is a pedal board, and you run your guitar through all of these different pedals, and the pedals run into the amplifier, which gives your guitar volume. And there are as many pedals as you can imagine. And I loved it. I loved buying them and selling them and trading them and always trying to customize my board. I bought different kinds of boards. I loved taking the pedals and working on the connections and laying them out. And because I had a leadership role with the worship team, I was able to really kind of self-determine what role I would play in the weekends. And when I read this book for the first time, I had begun taking my electric guitar playing public. Now, that was probably a bad idea in the first place because, again, wasn't very good at it, but I loved it. I really loved it. And when I would play electric guitar, because I lacked skill in it, I would practice for hours, multiple weeks, preparing for that weekend because it just took time. I had to get all my pedals set up the right way. Even if I was trying every once in a while to learn some lead lines, I had to figure all of this stuff out. And it was taking hours and hours of my time. And I loved it. It was time that I really, really enjoyed. And people fail because they don't have the guts to quit things that are distracting them from their destination. And I read that line and I knew what I had to quit. You see, those hours and hours that I was spending practicing and playing and buying and selling pedals and tweaking my amp and setting up my guitars and trying to learn the lead lines, those hours and hours were not leading me towards my purpose. My purpose was never and is never going to be Eric Clapton Jr. playing the electric guitar and changing the world through my sweet riffs. That's not my future. My purpose was to communicate truth. And I knew that there were some areas that I needed to greatly extend my mastery. At the time, I wasn't much of a reader, and I didn't have a lot of time to read because I was putting so many hours into an instrument that I was only getting incrementally better at. I read that book and I knew the first change I needed to make. I wasn't quitting my job. I wasn't moving to a different country. I wasn't changing career fields. I was staying in the exact position in the exact same organization. By the end of that week, I had either given away or sold all of my electric guitar gear, my electric guitar amps, and my electric guitar. I loved it so much that I knew if I kept it around, I would keep picking it up and playing on it a little bit. And I want to spend the life I have well. And I want to make an impact during my time on earth. And I think I have some clarity on my purpose, that I'm called to deliver the truths of Jesus to as many people as I can. And so I needed to widely broaden my communication skills, which means I had to take in vastly more content. And so I exchanged the hours playing electric guitar and I began to use it for reading books and learning management skills and attaching myself to mentors. And the results within a couple of years put me on a path towards the life that I truly want to live. I've seen it. And my electric guitar was like my bowl of beans, you know? And you don't think of it that way. But I was in danger of trading my long-term purpose for this short-term gain. Some of you are just really struggling right now. You're struggling at work, you're struggling in your marriage, but you are where you need to be. And you're in danger of trading your long-term purpose because of short-term pain. And so what is it that you need to get out of your life? What are you currently doing that isn't leading you towards where you want to go? And do you actually have the courage and the clarity to quit? What is it that is causing you really to struggle right now, even though you truly believe you're on the right path? Can you see your future clear enough to persevere? How do you know when it's time to quit? You have to look at your destination. You have to point your life in an appropriate direction. If you are really clear on your destination and you know that your purpose, potential, and passions are on the other side of it, then the dip is worth the destination. If you know that you're at a dead end, your life is too important for that. Put a plan together. Put a timeline on it. Begin to discover your purpose. We spend so much time scrolling feeds and binging shows that we don't stop to really ask ourselves, who do I want to become? And what do I want to accomplish in the short life that we're all given? I hope that these kind of conversations will, if nothing else, encourage you to just set aside some time to be intentional about understanding where you are in life and mapping out your future. Don't just work some job for some money to buy some things. You're far too valuable for that. Don't stay in dead ends and broken processes that aren't leading you to your future. Quit them. Do it with a plan. Don't do it foolishly or recklessly, but put a plan in place to quit. And when you find yourself on the appropriate paths, persevere. Keep the end in mind. Remind yourself constantly of the future that you are fighting for. Don't get so blinded by short-term gain or short-term pain. Don't give up your birthright for a bowl of beans. Don't give up the $1 million for a rack of ribs. Don't give up what is coming for the struggle that you're currently enduring. I, as always, want to thank you guys for joining me on the Clayton Tyner podcast. And I really hope that this is something that's helpful to you. If it is helpful, really encourage you guys to share this, to copy this link, share it with your friends, send it to them on a text message, post it on your social media, use your voice. You have influence. And if you think this will be helpful, make sure that you pass it along. I, again, really encourage you to check out this very short, very powerful book, The Dip by Seth Godin. I love you guys, and I hope to see you next week.